Today, we are diving deep into one of the most repeated and misunderstood ideas in all of machine learning. It's a fact that you'll find in countless textbooks and tutorials. But what if it's just plain wrong?
You've heard this, right? It's one of those things that just gets passed around. For decades, it's been the go-to conventional wisdom. And hey, it sounds good, it feels like it should be true. But as we're about to see, it's an idea that's built on some really shaky ground.
And yeah, that's the big question we're tackling. We're going to pull back the curtain and show why this seemingly innocent statement isn't just a little inaccurate. It can actually be pretty dangerous when you apply it in the real world.
So here's the game plan. First, we'll dig into why this myth got so popular in the first place. Then we'll hit it with 3 major structural flaws that really break the whole idea apart. We'll look at real-world evidence, talk about the high-stakes consequences, and wrap up by pointing to a much better approach.
All right, so first things first. How on earth did this become such a widespread belief? Well, when you look at the logic on the surface, it seems almost airtight.
The argument basically goes like this, right? Step 1. Logistic regression is built to optimize for log loss, which is what's known as a proper scoring rule. In simple terms, that means it's designed to reward a model for being honest about its uncertainty. Step 2, it spits out its predictions using the sigmoid function, which squishes everything neatly between 0 and 1. So step 3, while those outputs must be real probabilities, right? They must be calibrated. It's simple, it's elegant, and it's wrong.
Now we get to the heart of it. Let's break down the 3 big structural reasons why those probabilities from a logistic regression model are almost always miscalibrated in the wild.
The first flaw is a real shocker. It turns out, even in a perfect world with perfect data, the model is mathematically hardwired to be overconfident. And this isn't because you did something wrong. It's a bias that comes from the actual shape of this sigmoid function. It's an error that gets bigger as d, your number of features, grows relative to n, your sample size. This bias is literally baked into the algorithm's DNA.
And here's what that actually means. The sigmoid function has this natural tendency to push its predictions out toward the extremes, away from the middle. So if your model predicts a 70% chance of something, the real-world probability is actually lower. And if it predicts a 30% chance, the real-world probability is actually higher. The bottom line, it's structurally, systematically overconfident.
And believe me, this isn't just some academic thought experiment. This bias is a huge deal in any field where you have a lot of features compared to your data points. We're talking about genomics, clinical risk prediction, modern NLP, and all these areas that D over N ratio gets big, and this bias becomes a real problem that distorts your results.
Okay, moving on to flaw number 2. Let's say we could just wave a magic wand and get rid of that structural bias. We'd still have another massive problem. Our model's simple assumptions just don't match the messy reality of the world.
See, here's the fine print they don't always tell you about. The underlying theory only guarantees something called marginal calibration. All that means is that the average of all your predictions will match the average of all the real outcomes. But that's not what we need for decision-making, is it? We need auto-calibration. We need to know that for the specific group of things our model gives a 70% probability to, about 70% of them actually happened. And the theory makes absolutely no promise about that.
And this brings us to our third and final flaw. This one comes from a tool that almost all of us use every single day to prevent overfitting: regularization.
Think about it. Pretty much every library out there, like scikit-learn, applies L2 regularization by default. And it's great for what it does. It shrinks your model's coefficients to make it generalize better. But there's a side effect. Shrinking those coefficients systematically pushes all the predicted probabilities back towards the middle, towards 0.5. So now, the model becomes systematically underconfident, which is the exact opposite of the structural overconfidence from flaw number 1. You have these 2 powerful forces pushing in opposite directions, and there's just no magic setting that perfectly balances them out.
So, we've got these 3 pretty solid theoretical arguments. But does any of this actually show up in practice? Well, let's move from the theory to the hard evidence.
And the answer is a resounding yes. When you look at large-scale empirical studies, you see the same story over and over again. Raw, out-of-the-box logistic regression models consistently show clear signs of being miscalibrated. And here's the smoking gun. Applying a second calibration step after you've already trained the model almost always makes the results better.
And this isn't just a feeling. We can measure it. Key metrics for calibration, like log loss, Breyer score, and ECE, all improve when you use post-hoc methods like beta calibration. You know, the simple fact that you can take a calibrated model and make it more calibrated is probably the best proof you need that it wasn't really calibrated in the first place.
Okay,
At this point, you might be thinking, all right, I get it. It's not perfectly calibrated, but so what? How much does this really matter? Well, this is where we connect the dots from abstract theory to very real, very high-stakes consequences.
The thing is, for any system that has to make a real decision, a simple label of yes or no isn't enough. What these systems truly rely on is the probability. They need to know how confident the model is in its prediction to make a sensible choice.
And this is absolutely non-negotiable in critical fields. Imagine a doctor trying to gauge a patient's risk of disease, a bank deciding whether to approve a crucial loan, or the AI in a self-driving car making a split-second safety decision. In these situations, a bad probability score isn't just a number on a screen. It can have life-altering consequences.
When you build a system that trusts these flawed probabilities, you're basing it on a lie. You end up with completely incorrect estimates of risk. Your decision thresholds become unreliable, and any calculation you make about expected gains or losses gets totally distorted. You're flying blind.
So, if the old way is broken, what's the path forward? That brings us to our final section. It's time to move past this myth and toward a much more robust and honest way of thinking about uncertainty.
One of the most promising frameworks out there today is conformal prediction. What's so powerful about it is that it doesn't rely on all the fragile assumptions that older models do. Instead, it's designed from the ground up to give you rigorous, mathematically sound guarantees about its uncertainty, no matter what your data looks like.
And really, that's the bottom line. Logistic regression is still a fantastic, useful algorithm, but this idea that it hands us perfectly calibrated probabilities for free is a myth we urgently need to retire. The systems we're building today demand more from us. They don't just need predictions. They need probabilities we can actually count on, probabilities that actually correspond to what's happening in the real world.